So you've been working with metal sheet and you probably have a lot of scrap. Today I want to show you how you can turn that scrap into beautiful layered earrings. I have scrap from different projects I've done, and you can see that these have all been textured. It doesn't have to be textured sheet metal, or if it hasn't been textured, don't be shy about texturing it before you cut out your pieces to make the components of your layered scrap earrings. You can even use some of the smallest components. And we're going to talk a little bit about design concept while you make your earrings. You can see from some of my samples here, I have a lot of different varied shapes, sizes, and generally I like to do a graduated formation from the biggest or widest being at the top to the bottom. But you can always mix that up and do it from the bottom up, or they can all be the same size. They don't have to be uniform, they can be asymmetrical. And even when I do asymmetry, I don't always exactly mirror each one. But I want to show you a few different ways that you can prepare your pieces and refine them once you've got all your scrap laid out. And one of my favorite studio tools are these metal shears right here. And they cut through several different gauges of metal. Just make sure you're using the right metal cutter for the gauge of metal you're working with here. These are both 26 gauge copper sheet, which is pretty thin and easy to work with, but not so thin that they're kind of flimsy. So I've taken a magic marker and or a permanent marker, fine tip would be best, and some templates to cut out my shape, to get my shapes. And just going to go right in there, and these work really well. I see I even have enough scrap here that I might use that little tab right by my thumb. Could be another piece of my components. Now sometimes I use my scrap metal and I make slightly larger components to make things like necklaces. So we're cutting this out, and the metal's still very malleable and soft, and when you cut you might notice it's going to curl. You can just take your bench block and either your rawhide mallet, or I'm actually going to take the chasing hammer here and just slightly flatten it down. Let's cut out one more of these because we want to talk about shape. I can leave these squares nice and flat. And one of the things I want to tell you about when I work with squares, even though I want them to obviously be a square when I'm done, I find the edges are a little sharp. So I would either take a file and gently round them, and also smooth the edges with a file. It can be a crosscut or a diamond file. My preference is a diamond file, so I can get smoothing from both sides when I pull it. So we'll take a look at that and get our scrap out of the way. And we'll get the one we flattened here. So this is a diamond file. So I get smoothing when I go in both motions. Okay, not enough to really change the shape of the square, but just so there's not any real pointy edges. Okay, that looks pretty good. So one of the ways I might shape it if I choose not to leave it flat is to take some round nose pliers and just slightly bend it over the edge, so I have a little curvature from side to side. And those will hang a unique way than a flat one does. The other thing I might like to do is use a dapping block and round this. So when I start with a dapping block, I might start with a larger hole. That's not going to give me the curvature I'm looking for, but I want to do this gradually. So I'm going to take the larger dapping pin and just kind of center it over there, and I'm taking the copper mallet and just striking it down to get the curvature. And let's see how much curvature we have. That's actually kind of nice. It's a little subtle. Let's take it down just a tad more. So we're going to find a cavity that's going to give it a bit more curvature, and pick a smaller dapping pin and just tap it down. Don't forget to kind of go around the edges and make sure the sides are all uniform. And let's see what we have now. Okay. Now, one thing I could have done beforehand is put my hole in it. I can still put a hole in it. It's a little bit easier if you do it before you shape your pieces. And let me show you one of the ways I can put a hole in my piece. If it's going to be uniform, like these rectangles here that are fairly uniform, you might want to mark it with a permanent marker before you do that. And when I use things like my multi-tool, usually what I do is hit it ahead of time with a center punch. And this is a spring-loaded center punch. It has a bit of a tip on there. I'm going to take my bench block here, and you just stand right up above your piece. So this is straight up and down, and you're going to push until you hear it pop, like that. Now sometimes, depending on the gauge of the metal, it will actually put a hole all the way through. This one, we've got a dimple. Now you can use your multi-tool or a hand drill, but I find with the gauge metal I'm working with, all I need, let's get this out of the way, is to use the round file. So when I'm using an electric tool, I usually work on a bench pin, a wooden bench pin, and go straight down because you don't want to drill with your finger behind it. I am just gently drilling with the diamond drill bit, or you can use the crosscut file, and I can feel it just touch my finger. I can't put so much force and speed that I'm going to drill into my finger. I'm going to enlarge it ever so slightly. Once you're done drilling, you're going to have a bit of a burr. Whether you do it from the top or the bottom, you're going to want to file that down. You can use sandpaper or these diamond files, but it usually takes a few strokes to bring that down. Let's see if we can get it in the middle there. Okay, let's check it now with our pin. So now I'm ready to mount them on here, and before I do that, another way I like to do these pieces is to maybe put a little curvature in them. You can see on this sample I put quite a bit of curvature into them. On this one I'm going to use a metal ring mandrel and just select a size. I'm going to go where it says size 9 and just make a little bit more subtle curvature. Actually, let's take it up to 10, and I can just bend them down around there. Okay. I'm really happy with those. So I'm taking these long, these are 3mm crimp tubes. So you thought they were just for crimping, but you can use a more pronounced spacer. They can be metal, they can be beads, whatever is pleasing to your eye. But I want to space these in between so they're suspended and can move independently of one another. You're going to want to finish off the end. Now for earrings, I don't always do a coil finish. Usually this is strong enough and these are lightweight enough that I can just finish off with a simple loop. And I'm going to bend it at 90 degrees, and I'm using a flush cutter here, and I want the flat end of the blade to be facing the inside of my wire so I have a nice straight edge. Be sure to point it down at your work area or hold the end of the wire so it doesn't go flying. You wouldn't want to get that in your eye. And with the round nose pliers, I've shown this trick in another video. I'm going to show you how I measure where to grab it from. So I measure it right where the bend reaches in from the tip. And if you don't have a really good memory for that because maybe you just haven't gotten as much practice, you can always mark that area with a permanent marker on your pliers and remove it later. And add the ear wire of your choice, or even a post. Maybe you like that as your finish. So we're slipping in a copper ear wire and closing it off with these chain nose pliers. And let's add a crystal. And I would just repeat this for my second earring. And what a wonderful way to use up your scrap materials. Nobody would ever guess that they were from just leftover scraps. Thanks so much for joining me here today in the Fire Mountain Gems and Beads Jewelry Making Studio.